Hi, my name is Michaela Foote, and today I'm going to talk about the Internet of Things, which is a fairly new concept. It's kind of taken off in the last 10 years, and I'm just going to go over basically what the Internet of Things is, where it came from, what the potential things you can do with it today are, how you can do those things, and what in the future you'll be able to do with the Internet of Things. So, the Internet of Things is kind of a weird term for this. If you're not familiar with it, it might seem like it doesn't really make sense. But the definition is that it's a system of interrelated computing devices, mechanical and digital machines, objects, animals, or people that are provided with unique identifiers and the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human to human or human to computer interaction. And that sounds maybe a little complicated, but basically what it is it's a system that allows you to connect quickly with things instead of having to go through an interface or even interact at all. So it's automating your life, making your life quicker by using the cloud and the internet to hold data and take care of data for you. And some examples that you might see today that you might be familiar with. First is the Amazon Dash button. So this button, for example, in this picture here, uses Cheez-Its. So let's say you really love Cheez-Its, you have kind of an addiction to Cheez-Its, and you have this problem where every month you run out of Cheez-Its and you have to go buy them. And after about 2 days you get them. And those 2 days between when you buy it and when you get them, you're really missing Cheez-Its. What this button allows you to do is when you see you're close to running out, you press it and it orders it online for you from Amazon without having to go through the internet, without having to pay for it or whatever on the website. Instead, it just goes directly to your Amazon account, buys it for you, and all of that. Second, there's the Fitbit. This has a couple different Internet of Things inside of it. So the first one is that it has a heart rate monitor, which will randomly during the day monitor your heart rate, like maybe when you wake up, maybe when you're exercising. And then it takes that data, puts it on graphs so that you can look at it later and not have to take it manually all the time. It also has a GPS so that you can track your runs, and it will tell you, hey, here's where you ran, here's how long you ran, here's the amount you ran, and I'll hold that in the cloud so that you don't have to worry about where it's storing. You don't have to do it yourself. And lastly, the Nest. It's a thermostat, and it basically lets you control the temperature of your house when you're not there. So you can program it saying, hey, I'm going to be at work from 9 to 5. I don't need it to be warm or cold in the house at that time. Don't worry about it. And it ends up saving you a lot of money and also a lot of hassle. So maybe in the morning, if you're cold, you can have it set to warm at that time. So where did this concept come from? The name originally came from a guy named Kevin Ashton, who worked at P&G or Procter and Gamble, and he came up with the idea because he wanted to seem interesting in a presentation. And what he was talking about with the Internet of Things was RFID, which is the technology that vets use and different companies use to basically identify tags or little sensors within things, so that from far away you can say, oh, this dog belongs to this person without having to have a actual like hard tag. It can be in the dog. And so the idea that you don't have to always touch things and that the internet kind of can connect it for you is where that came from. And so although that was in 1999, the Internet of Things didn't really take off until 2010 when Google Street View started making 360-degree pictures and storing that data on people's Wi-Fi networks. So they were kind of wondering if Google was going to start trying to index the internet. Around that time, the Chinese government also announced that it was going to start making it a priority because they saw that you could hold a lot more information and make things a lot more quick over the internet. Lastly, the International Data Corporation said that by 2010, the Internet of Things would be an $8.9 trillion market. And then in 2014, Google for $3.2 billion bought Nest, which kind of showed the world that, hey, this is something that's new and it's coming and it's happening. And you can kind of see on this graph that happens, and in the last year even, the interest of the Internet of Things has shot up dramatically. So what can you do with it right now? So there's a bunch of different areas that the Internet of Things uses right now. First, wearables. I already mentioned the Fitbit, but the Apple Watch as well uses it to automate different apps you might be using on your wrist, or it lets you talk to your phone without being really connected to it. Secondly, there's smart homes. So Smart House was a Disney movie I loved when I was a kid, and some of those things in the movie are possible right now. So smart TVs, smart refrigerators that keep track of your different ingredients that you have, the different recipes you have on file. Those are things you can buy today. Connected cars. Everyone knows self-driving cars are becoming really popular now. And with self-driving cars, there's sensors that are used in these cars that really are Internet of Things, because it's connecting to the cloud saying, here's where all of these cars are, and they're communicating over the cloud. And also there's apps now that say, hey, here's where your car's parked, or you can press a button on your watch saying, please open the garage door. There's also agriculture. So right now there's a company that is making sensors to tell you how your plant's doing, what the nutrition level is like, what's the water level like, and they're starting to use this on a really mass level, so that people who are growing our food now are going to be able to shortly use this technology for making their growth a lot more productive and not having to check that themselves. You can also see there's this tweeting plant, so that's something I actually made, and you'll be able to see that later when I go over it. And it's basically a plant that's that sensor gets data and puts it to the cloud and tweets it to Twitter. And then lastly, healthcare. So in this diagram, basically there's a camera and a pill, and that pill is able to, or that camera is able to go to the cloud and say, tell the physician, hey, here's how the pill's doing, here's the reactions. And this is a really new technology, but things in healthcare like that are actually possible today. So how can I do it? So like I said, a year ago I built a plant sensor that basically took in plant light, plant soil moisture, and then it sent it to a server and a database, and I was able to have that information stored in the cloud instead of having to worry about my plants. And so what I used for that server was Amazon EC2, which basically holds all this cloud information, held my server, held my database, which was Mongo database, which is a NoSQL server, so that means it didn't have a strong structure to it. And I created an IP address that I could post that information to, and then when I looked up that address, I could see what kind of information I was getting from my plant. Here's some of the sensors I used. So this Arduino, it's basically a tiny computer, and it's really used because it can do a lot of things in a tiny little space. I also used this Wi-Fi chip. So it's kind of like an Arduino, but it has Wi-Fi in it, which means I can connect to the Wi-Fi and then send data to the cloud. With that, I can connect the sensor to that using different cords, and then it will let me plug that in to the sensors, and then the sensor basically becomes Wi-Fi enabled, so that it can do different things and have different functions that I need it to do. So this is the sensor that took in the moisture level of my plant. And then I also had a light sensor or a temperature sensor that sensed how hot or cold that plant was to make sure it wasn't too chilly. And then so I used that as the power source because I didn't have kind of a smaller one in place at the time. You can also use a lot of sensors to do different Internet of Things. Like that one, for example, is a sound sensor. So I could say, hey, I want to know what the noise level of my house is at various times during the day. And yeah. Here's some code I used. So basically I checked, hey, if the temperature is high, tell me that. If it's low, tell me that too. So that I kind of was aware. Then I also had it check the humidity and the moisture level just so I knew that those ranges were okay. Here's just some code that I used to connect to the Wi-Fi. And then here's my server code. So when I called this, it would say, hey, I want you to run my IP. All of those were just bits of the code. It was more, but yeah, it was exciting. So what will you be able to do in the future? So Norton says that has basically 5 predictions of the future of IoT. And the big thing is that it thinks that the Industrial Revolution was a huge revolution. The internet in general was a huge revolution. And then the new revolution is going to be IoT, that it has the potential to become the forefront of our minds and our technology, and to turn maybe eventually everything to the cloud, such as maybe your oven, maybe your vacuum cleaner even, to automate your life and let you know when you need to be doing stuff so you don't have to really worry about it. Also, they think cities are going to become very connected to the Internet of Things. So saying, hey, if these cars are here, this stoplight needs to be that, either green or red or yellow. And it will be able to connect to the internet instead of having to manually have an algorithm for it. The internet can constantly be checking values and reacting to those values. Artificial technology also is really important with the Internet of Things. So this is, like I touched on before, the Nest, the thermostat, lighting systems. So it will be able to make your life a lot easier and collect data on your habits and patterns without you needing to really worry about it. And it can learn for you and tell you maybe here's what would be best for you. Maybe this is the best time for you to wake up or have light in your home. And lastly, with IoT, we're going to have to start worrying a lot about hackers and security, because if everything suddenly becomes on the web, it will become a lot easier to hack into. There'll be a lot more possibilities of things to go wrong. So imagine if some people read in values saying, okay, here's where all the cars are, and all of a sudden stoplights stop working. These are things we have to start thinking about and working through. So IoT is a very new technology in the scheme of things, but it's actually been around for quite a bit of time, and it's only been growing every year. Like you saw in that graph earlier, the more the IoT grows, the more technology we'll have, and the more we'll see its impact in our life. And here's my citations. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. I hope you found interest in this as much as I love IoT and the idea of it. Thank you.